Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our weekly Parsha class. Sorry for the slight delay today, starting at a later time. Hopefully be able to catch this class whether right now with me or later on the recording. And the Torah portion this week is the Torah portion of Shlach, which is a very interesting Torah portion, fascinating Torah portion, which describes the spies. On the face of it, it seems to be a pretty simple story. Moshe sends spies. They come back with a negative report about the land. And they are punished because of that. The entire Jewish nation is punished because of that. That seems to be simple enough. But upon further reflection, there are numerous very basic questions which can and should be asked when studying the Torah portion. There are some, what's in Yiddish, there's a term called a klutz kasha. Klutz kasha means just a
Yes, sir. Peace out.
And there seems to be pretty obvious questions when it comes to our Torah portion. But let's go through, as we usually do. Let's study the text of from the text. Share the screen and the text of the beginning of the Torah portion. So here we are. Chapter 13, verse number 1. God speaks to Moshe saying, Shlach lecha anashim, send men out. The Asuru Eseres Canaan, they will scout the land of Canaan. Asher ani nosein livnei Yisrael, the land which I will be giving to the Jewish people. Ish echad, one person, lamate avosav, to their father's tribe. Tishlachu should be sent, kol nasi bahem. Each one shall be a chieftain in their midst. All right, so we have this obligation that God directs Moshe to send out spies. So one question which comes up is the word shlach lecha anoshim, right over here. That small word lecha seems to be entirely unnecessary. And the English translation of that is the same. Send out for yourself. What does that add to the wording? It should be send out men who will scout the land. And so how do we understand the word lecha and men and send and for yourself? So the Talmud says that this word lecha is not just a necessary word, but an essential word in understanding what took place over here. The word lecha, says the Talmud, and Rashi quotes this later, Tractate Sota, ledaitcha. God says, not send out for yourself, but it's up to you. And it's really, it's an unusual command. God usually told Moshe what to do, and over here, he didn't say that. He said, if you want to, you can. Now, later in the book of Devarim, when it repeats this, this commandment, it says, when it talks about the story, Moshe Rabbeinu kind of spells out more what took place. Moshe Rabbeinu says, you approached me and you said, can we send spies to the land? So later, Moshe clarifies what exactly took place, and that is that they approached Moshe and said, can we send spies? Now, interestingly, last week's Torah portion, we also come across people approaching Moshe and asking for something that wasn't given to them. And last week's Torah portion, it was eventually given to them. That was the Pesach Sheni, the second Passover, where they complained. And the people who couldn't bring the carbon come to God and come to Moshe and say, we want to bring a carbon. And Moshe says, okay, I'll ask God. Moshe asks God, and God says, yes, they can bring the carbon a month later. Now, this Torah portion seems to have a similar story in which the Jewish people come to God, Moshe, and say, even though God didn't command, we'd love to send spies to the land. And Moshe says, let me ask God. So that part is a repeat. And over here, God's response is a little bit different. And the response is, Shlach lecha. God says to Moshe, it's up to you. If you want, go ahead. Now, the Rabbi asks a question. which is, shouldn't that have been the ultimate red flag? If God says to Moshe, it's up to you, wouldn't that be enough of a warning signal to Moshe, and therefore Moshe should not send? After God says to Moshe, Shlach lecha, what does Moshe do? He collects people and he sends them. Why wouldn't Moshe get the message that if God is saying it's up to you, it's God's way of saying maybe this is not a good idea? And it's a long answer that Rabbi gives. I'll try to share the idea very briefly. And that is that Moshe understood that God saying it's up to you doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad idea. It was God saying, I'm leaving this in the hands of the human being. I'm not commanding you. I'm making this optional. But sometimes making a mitzvah, making a divine idea optional doesn't mean that it's a bad idea. I'm not telling you to do it. It could be God saying, it's in your hands. There are certain areas in Judaism which are not an obligation, and yet we commit to it on our own. There are certain situations in which a person is not obligated to do a mitzvah, and yet they do it. So not being obligated doesn't mean it's a bad idea. And sometimes not being obligated, there are times where not being obligated to do something and doing so anyway is actually a great strength. It says that even though I didn't have to, but I did this extra step of commitment to God. So Moshe understood that when God says to Moshe, Shlach lecha, it's up to you. You don't have to, but if you want to, you could. Moshe saw this perhaps as an opportunity. That even though God is not requiring us to send spies, but maybe we could send spies in such a way that we strengthen our relationship with God, even though we didn't have to. Suppose the story would have turned out differently. Suppose the spies would have gone. This is certainly what Moshe was hoping for. Suppose the spies would have gone and come back with the message, with the united message of Yehoshua and Caleb. We can't judge Moshe on what happened. We have to judge Moshe on what he was hoping would happen. What he was hoping would happen is that everyone would come back with the message of Yehoshua and Caleb, which essentially was Tova ha'aretz ma'od ma'od. The land is very, very good. And therefore, could you imagine if all 12 spies would have gone and come back and saying, this land is fantastic. Yeah, there are some armies and there's some people and there's some concerns, but no biggie. We got through Egypt. We received the Torah at Sinai. We have a miraculous existence here in the desert. Everything will be fine. The land is great. So what would that have caused had they all said that? Could you imagine the excitement, the anticipation that would have caused for the Jewish people? It would have just strengthened their excitement for the land of Israel. It would have just strengthened their faith in God, their sense of appreciation. That's what Moshe was hoping for. And so therefore, when he hears God saying, Shlach lecha, you should send, he didn't hear a red flag that, be careful, I'm not telling you to do it. If you really want to, you could. No, he heard something else. He heard, it's up to you. It's an opportunity that you can do, but you don't have to do. And that's very different than the message of, be careful. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu continued to go forward with the plan of sending spies, even after hearing the words Shlach lecha. So he is told to send spies, or he's told it's up to you, send people to the land. Now, an interesting point is it says, ish echad, lemate avosa, one person to for their tribe. So the simple understanding of this is that there was one spy per tribe. But that is not the unanimous understanding of this. There is an opinion of the great Rabbi Akiva, who actually reads this more literally. Ish echad, one person. What's 1 + 1 is 2. One person was matched by another person. Today we are having our matching campaign for fundraisers. See, that was a nice segue. Matching campaign fundraiser here for our Torah Center. So Ish echad was matched by another Ish echad. One person matched by another person. So Yeshua says it's a frame of speech where you say one person per tribe. Yeshua says no, One person per tribe means 2 people per tribe. And in fact, according to Rabbi Akiva, there were 24 spies, not 12. Clearly, that's not the embraced understanding, but that's the way Rabbi Akiva understood this. There was 24 spies, not just 12. All right, what happens next? So they send the spies. Verse number 3, Moshe sends them in Midbar Paran al pi Hashem, by the mouth of God. And again, Rashi clarifies, what does that mean? It means with God's consent. God didn't stop him. Again, God didn't require it. God didn't stop him. Kulam Anoshim Rashi B'nei Yisrael Hema. These were all righteous men of distinction, heads of the Jewish people. So we are talking about not 12 troublemakers. These were 12 leaders. When you look at it that way, it allows you to understand the story a little bit more, why the Jewish people were swayed by these people, because these were their leaders. And what are the names of these people? And these are their names. For Reuben, it was Shamua ben Zakor. For Shimon, it was Shaphat ben Chori. For Yehuda, it was Kaleh ben Yefuna. Now, the Talmud actually does pause to analyze the names and talk about them, and how the names sometimes, in some of these names, indicated their wrongdoing. For example, Lamate, verse number 13. Lamate Asher Sesur ben Michael. For the tribe of Asher, a man named Sesur, son of Michael. Says the Talmud that the name alludes to his troublemaking. Sesur is closely related to the Hebrew word soter. Setur and soter is almost the exact same words. If you were to just switch around the vav and the tuf, it wouldn't be setur, it would be soter. What does soter mean? To destroy. Soter means to destroy. So Sesur is connected to the fact that he destroyed the plan, or he tried to destroy the divine plan of going into Israel. And the Talmud even says the word Michael, which is famous as a holy name. It's one of the angels. But the word Michael, the mem and the chaf, spell the word weak. Mach. Mach means weakened. So Mach is weak. Sesur means destroy. So the name alludes to the fact that he was weak and he tried to disrupt the divine plan. For that matter, though, if we are to go to a more positive side, it says Lamate Yehuda, to the tribe of Yehuda, was Kalev ben Yefuna. Now, Kalev ben Yefuna, the Talmud says Yefuna has a deeper meaning, and that is the word Yefuna is connected to the word Pana. Pana means to turn away from. Kalev had the strength to turn away from the ideas that the other spies were developing. So, Kalev had the strength to turn away from it. I once remember speaking years ago in this week's Torah portion to a group of high school students. And I pointed out that of the 12 tribes and all the people here, the one which really, arguably, is the most impressive of everyone here is Kalev. Even though there were 2 spies, Kalev and Yehoshua, both came back with great reports. Yeshua eventually becomes the successor to Moshe. But in this story, Kalev is the greater of the 2, because Yehoshua is already the prime prize student of Moshe. Furthermore, Moshe gives him a very special blessing. If you scroll down just a little bit, Vayikra Moshe Losheh ben Nun Yehoshua. Even as Moshe, as he goes out on this mission, Moshe already gives him a new name and prays for him, as Rashi says. Moshe prays for Yeshua. So Yeshua has this unique armor, this protection of the blessing of Moshe. But Kalev didn't have that. Kalev did not have any of the added blessing, did not have any of the added power that Yeshua had. And yet Kalev was the one who was able to summon the strength not to be influenced by those around him. And this is something which today we know with all sorts of social experiments that have been done on human beings. We've come to know how difficult it is to simply do differently than those around us. There are some fascinating experiments. So some of you, I'm sure, have come across or heard about the different shapes of the lines in which somebody was asked a question after 3 or 4 people answered one way. And it was exceptionally difficult for that person to answer a question differently than the way three people before you answered a harmless, consequenceless question. Just to simply answer differently than those before you is exceptionally difficult for many humans to do. The idea to go against the tide of what everyone else is doing is very difficult. To add to that, if we are to examine this case of Kalev, it's not as if you would say, well, if you're a Jew in a hostile environment, so then you stand up for what it means to be a Jew and you do something differently than everyone else does. Kalev was surrounded by Jews. It wasn't as if it was outsiders who were trying to go in a certain path. It was his own group, my chevra, as we say. It was his group of people, and they were the ones who went in a certain direction. For him to be able to have the courage to stand and be different, not just than those who are clearly different than you, but even those who look like you. Even those who look like you, but you see them very clearly making a bad choice right now, that takes exceptional strength. And that's what Kalev showed. So this is the strength of Kalev, and that's where the word Yifuna comes from. Pana means to be able to turn away. It takes exceptional strength to turn away when you are part of a group that is involved in doing something wrong. It takes remarkable strength to turn away and say, I am going to carve my own path of what is right. Fine. All right, so he sends these people. He tells them to scout the land. He calls Yehoshua. And then Moshe says, here's what I want you to check out. He actually gives them directions of what I'd like for you to do. Verse 17, he tells them to scout the land. Vayomer, and he says, Aluza Benegah, go up this way in the south and climb up the mountain. Go from the south and climb up. Uri'isam esa aretz mahi, go see the land. What is it? And the people that are in it. Hachazaku harafa, are they strong? Are they weak? Hama'atu imrav, are they many or are they few? Are they strong or weak? So Rashi here shares something very interesting. He said, how would you know if a group, if this city is strong or weak? And he says like this, Simin Masar Lehem. He gave them a sign. He said, if they live in open cities, it is a sign that they are strong, since they rely on their might. And if they live in fortified cities, it is a sign that they are weak. So it's actually counterintuitive. If you come to a city and you see a giant fortified wall, the initial reaction is, wow, this must be a very strong city. It's very strong because look at the wall. You come to a city which is wide open, you say, this is an easy target. There's no wall. Says Moshe, no, the opposite is true. The city with a thick wall is a city that's afraid and therefore puts up a wall. That's why that's a city you shouldn't be afraid of. You should walk confidently toward. A city without a wall, that's a city which has true strength. I once read the following. I think I saw this in the name of Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, who said that this idea is true about cities and it's true about people. And he said the following, which I've always remembered. I've found it to be very profound. He said, people also put up walls. People also guard themselves from saying things. There's all sorts of metaphoric understanding. I think we all relate to it inherently, to the idea of putting up walls, that some people put up walls between them and others. And it is a metaphoric wall. We're not talking about a literal wall, but that I have a wall that protects me. I don't want to share my feelings. I don't want to express myself. I don't want to open up to a friend. I don't want to open up to a mentor. I don't want to open up to a teacher. I create that wall. This logic that he says over here, that Moshe says, is if you see a wall, that's not a sign of inner strength. That's a sign of inner fear. It's a sign of inner weakness. To the contrary, the city which is wide open is a sign of strength. And the same is true with the human being. The human being, ourselves, if we have the ability to open up, to talk to a friend, the Gemara says, "Daiga belev ish yaschena." If you have a worry, talk about it with someone. If you have a problem, share it. The Pirkei Avos says, make for yourself a friend, acquire a friend, make for yourself a mentor. All these are ways of saying, don't put up walls between you and your fellow, because the wall is a weakness. It means that you're afraid of sharing, and you shouldn't. We're here to help one another. It doesn't mean that a person should broadcast. A person has to know the limit of it. A person doesn't mean that a person should broadcast whatever they're going through on social media and let the whole world know whatever feelings they're going through. That's not a healthy approach either. You see it, but it's not a healthy approach. A healthy approach is to be able to be open to those who can help me, those who I know are close to me and care about me. And that's an open city, and that's a city which has strength. And I'm confident in myself enough to be able to share the problems I am going through. When I don't have the confidence to share what I'm going through, then that comes from a place of fear, and it's not a healthy way. It's not always easy. It's not easy for us, for those of us going through, or when we go through challenging times, there is a part of us which is either afraid or even ashamed. But one should remember that the guidance of Torah, the guidance of the Talmud is that one should find at least one person that they could open up to and talk to, not create that wall between them and everyone else. Now, one additional idea about this is that, and this is an essential idea, you may have come across this if you've studied this parsha, and that is, what did the spies do wrong? That would be a simple question. Moshe sent them to find out what the land looked like. They came back and said, the land is very frightening. We can't get in there. What exactly do they do wrong? They simply were, to tell someone, I want you to go and give me a report, but the report has to be good, then that's dishonest. If he was telling something about an honest mission to come back with a report, so they came back with the report. How could you be upset at the messenger? Messenger just is reporting back on what they were told to do. And the answer, the most basic answer, is that they were not sent to determine if the Jews or God were strong enough to conquer the land of Israel. That was never their mission. In fact, the Hebrew word at the beginning of the parsha is v'yasuru, send people, and they should scout the land, or v'yaturu is almost like tour the land, to go toward the land, come back and tell us what the land looks like. We're certain that we could go in. We're certain that if God says we're going to go in. That's not the challenge over here. We just need some guidance as to what is the best way to go in. Moshe was not sending them to come back with a report of whether they could go in, but rather how they should go in. And that was their essential mistake. They came back, and instead of reporting, as their mission was, of the details of the land to determine what is the wisest choice of how to enter, instead they came back with a report of that the land is too strong and too frightening to enter altogether. So in truth, they left with the wrong attitude. They went in with the wrong attitude, and therefore they came out with the wrong attitude. Often in situations like this in life, the mistake is not how we return, but how we enter. They didn't go in with the right mindset. They went in with the mindset of, let's see if we can or cannot conquer the land. That was never what their mission was. They were never tasked with that. They were tasked with one thing. The fact that we can go in is already a foregone conclusion. The only question is how to go in, how best to go in. And that was their mistake. And that too continues to be relevant in life. And that is often when we know that God wants something from us and we approach a situation and it seems to be daunting. The attitude should be not if I can accomplish this, but how can I accomplish this? In many situations in life, you do have to scout. You do have to check out what is the right approach to take. There's a friend of mine who perhaps I could help or I could influence. So the scouting would mean thinking through the process of how can I help them? But the end goal should be clear in my mind that I can and I will assist them, that I can and I will accomplish this divine mission. Not if I can, I can. The only question is, what's the best approach to take? Good. That's the healthy approach to spying on the land or spying on any circumstance in which I have to conquer a divine mission that I'm meant to accomplish. All right. With that, we conclude this discussion. Thank you, Cyril. Good to see you. Thank you for joining for our grand conclusion. And I will say, as I mentioned earlier, today is a big day for our organization. as we are of a matching campaign. Well, all donations are matched. I'll type in over here the link to the website. If you'd like to give, any amount is appreciated, and it'll be double. So it's a pleasure studying together again today, and I look forward to studying again next Wednesday, the next week's Torah portion of Korah, another fascinating story. Be well, everyone. Have a great week. Some of you may be joining me again tomorrow night for our Talmud class, and I look forward to that. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. All the
Thank
best.
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm late.
It's okay. I think this is recorded. Actually, I'll stop the recording now.
Okay. Yeah.